They have to come in through YouTube. They have to come in through YouTube. They have to come in through YouTube. Yeah. You ready? Okay, good evening, everybody. I will call this special council meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. by formally recognizing that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We respectfully acknowledge our responsibility to work toward right relations with our Indigenous partners and thank all of the generations of people who have taken care of this place for thousands of years. In particular, we acknowledge the proud heritage of our neighbors from the Alderville First Nation and the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. I will also advise that due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting will be held using various formats. Members of council and some senior staff are present here in council chambers. Other meeting participants will join us electronically. The public is invited to join us by viewing this meeting live on the Municipality of Brighton YouTube channel. I will also note that once we proceed into closed session, the live YouTube stream will end for the duration of tonight's special council meeting. And with that, I have a motion moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that Council approve the February 23rd, 2021 special council meeting as presented. Is there any discussion? I'll go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
I just had one question around the special council meeting. Is this the municipality paying for it or the developer?
The municipality will be paying for this.
Okay, that was my only question on why we did it today instead of waiting until, because the deferral gave them up till March 11th.
I think Mr. Castleman may want to speak to why we've added it to this meeting. Is there anything further on the agenda? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. The members of council ask if you have any declarations of pecuniary interest, and if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. The first item on our meeting, the only item on our open session meeting, is the assumption of Applewood Meadows Phase 1. This is a staff report. And so, Mr. Castleman, I will turn the floor over to you to advise why we're holding this in this open session of this council meeting.
The purpose of this report is really to follow up on a recommendation that was made back in January 11th to assume phase 1 of the Applewood subdivision. There are significant securities that are being held pending the assumption of this phase. The developer is active within the community, has a number of other projects on the go, all very exciting, quite frankly. And it's incumbent upon the municipality to turn its mind to the appropriate assumption and release of securities in a timely fashion. So we thought that given that we had first turned our mind to the January 11th meeting and time ticks by 5 weeks or so, we felt it was appropriate to bring it back, knowing that we had a meeting scheduled for tonight in any event.
So no additional cost to the municipality. We were going to be holding a meeting anyway.
That's correct.
Do you want to speak to the, Mr. Parkinson has put this report together. Do you want to speak to the report before we read the motion?
Happy to speak to the report. Mr. Parkinson was the author of the report. Unfortunately, he's unable to be with us this evening because of some medical issues. So staff are going to do a tag team with respect to this report. And really, from my perspective, we're talking about two different issues. The first issue is the appropriateness of assuming phase one of the Applewood subdivision and the contractual obligations that both the municipality has and the developer has in that regard. We have looked very closely at the subdivision agreement and the contractual obligations associated thereto, have received a legal opinion, have reviewed the approvals that have been in place for a number of years. The concern over the deferral back in January 11th was associated with the Orchard Gate Pond and the size of the pond and its ability to receive the flow of part of Applewood Phase 1. And what I can say to you definitively is that we've done some extensive research, and in our view, the developer has met its contractual obligations associated with the subdivision agreement that they entered into in October 2026. And what's interesting is that as part of our research, we looked at Orchard Gate Phase 1 and Phase 2, and we assumed, the municipality, we assumed that subdivision back in the spring of 2016. And in so doing, we became the owners of the Orchard Gate Pond. And as a result of becoming the owners, we are responsible for any and all future maintenance and or expansion thereto. So I wanted to differentiate the two issues. One is dealing with the storm pond and the adequacy of the storm pond. And the other one is, the other issue is associated with the contractual obligation of the developer to meet the terms and conditions of the subdivision agreement. So certainly in my view and staff's view, the developer has met those requirements, and you have a recommendation in front of you relating to the assumption of phase one of the Applewood subdivision. So that's firstly. Secondly, the issue or concern was with respect to the waste management or waste master plan that we had completed back in February.
Sorry, just to correct you,
Stormwater management pond, right. We had completed that report and adopted that report back in 2019. And the consultant who completed the report had made a number of different recommendations with respect to stormwater management, and one of which was the adequacy and size of the Orchard Gate Pond. And while interesting, their comments really are not associated with the Applewood Phase 1 development. We are the owner, have been the owner since 2016. Any reports and or comments or recommendations that flow out of the master plan really is up to the municipality, given that we're the owner of the pond, to implement, not implement, whatever recommendations that flow out of that master plan. So from my perspective, there are two separate issues here, and we have a strong recommendation with respect to the developer's obligation. And as requested by council, we have gone out and gotten a peer review associated with the pond and the adequacy of the pond as directed by council. And you have a copy of that report appended to the February 23rd report. And we also have our consultant who completed the peer review with us tonight to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Castleman. I'll read the motion and then I'll open the floor for questions. There's a motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that council receives the 2021 Joule Peer Review Report regarding the design and effectiveness of Orchard Gate Pond in consideration of conclusions contained within the EOR Stormwater Master Plan regarding same, and direct staff to take into consideration the observations and recommendations of the Joule report during future pond maintenance activities. And further, that council enact a bylaw to assume the following roads and related services for public use within phase 1 of Applewood Meadows subdivision further identified in Registered Plan 39M906 in accordance with the staff report presented at the January 11th, 2021 council session, and which has been appended here too. Specifically Royal Gala Drive, fronting lots 23 to 44, Crispin Street, and Cortland Way, fronting lots 1 to 22. Members of council, do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Tadman.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, it's nice that this has been brought here. I'm sure the developer will be happy to get his funds returned to him. But was there any other developers or anything on hold that could have easily used tonight too? Because the last time I voted against when it was brought ahead of a planning meeting within a few days, so it just almost, and maybe I'm wrong, it feels like this person's getting preferential treatment. So I asked the CAO, was there any others that could have been on this particular council?
Mr. Castleman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not to my knowledge. We deal with assumptions of subdivisions on a very periodic basis, and there were no others that were ready to go for consideration by council this evening.
Follow up.
Yes, well, it's not exactly, it's a follow-up to something similar. In the past, I never remember when we assume roads and subdivision that we assume the storm pond. Was it written into this one? Is that how we ended up assuming that pond?
We assumed it in 2016, if I'm reading the report correctly, Mr. Castleman.
Well, it says, but I don't remember ever knowing that we did.
So not to get into the technical language or the legalese associated with Orchard Gate 1 and 2 in the subdivision agreement, basically when we assumed that subdivision back in 2016, we assumed the associated roads and all of the other works that go along with that subdivision, including the storm pond. So when I speak to works, that is a defined term within the subdivision agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Bateman.
My question was similar because that's where my confusion was when I was reading it. Because when I look at the report from February 2016, and it was prepared by Lucas Kelly, it was for assumption of roads for public use. Nowhere in the report did it make reference to a stormwater pond. It was just assumption of the roads, and it named the roads. That's where I'm still confused on it. Because if I look at the new one, it says assumption of roads and services. So both reports read completely different.
Mr. Castleman, can we get some information around that? I think there's confusion around the wording of reports.
Certainly, and quite frankly, there's been an evolution with respect to the legalese and wording of the various subdivision agreements that we've turned our mind to over the last 5 to 10 years. So you're seeing different language in different subdivision agreements, and that's a natural evolution. I've looked at the subdivision agreement from Orchard Gate 1 and 2. Very comfortable with the definition of works and the association of the assumption of the pond back in 2016.
So although the report said roads, the subdivision agreement includes works, which would be public works issues like stormwater management concerns. Very well. Anyone else? Councillor Tadman?
So I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, but I don't remember us ever assuming any of the other ponds when we assume the roads. So this must be a new thing. And does it always happen now then that once we assume the roads in an area and that happens to be the storm pond there, we assume it? Is that what happens?
Mr.
I just want to be clear.
Yep.
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor. As I indicated, Councillor Tadman, we have multiple subdivision agreements within the municipality, all at different stages of approval, and each and every one is a little bit unique. So some subdivision agreements have storm ponds associated with them, some don't.
Oh, I know that.
Some don't, and in the normal course, it's been my experience that when you're assuming a particular subdivision agreement, it includes the works, and the works are defined within the subdivision agreement. And in this particular case, it happens to include a pond.
Councillor LeBlanc.
Through your chair for the CEO. So when the past council assumed Royal Gala, the main street that goes down, there's light poles that are missing, which add there. So that becomes part of the works that the town has to replace, these light poles that are missing that aren't there. when it was
Municipality.
assumed. Huh?
The municipality.
The municipality.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the reality is that if the municipality has assumed a subdivision, it becomes our responsibility and our assets to maintain on a go-forward basis.
So through your chair,
Go
so
ahead.
what I mean, if it was assumed those streets and they were lacking, now it becomes the municipality's responsibility, not the developers, to put these light poles in. Okay. This is the other question. So when I looked at other subdivisions agreements, the pond, the stormwater managed pond, is always brought in separately of the roads and the rest of the works and the sidewalks and the light. Because I've read some of the other ones. We have some now that I've asked to be assumed, but the pond is separately because I want to talk to some of the developers and I want to see their subdivision agreements. So this one doesn't say the pond. It doesn't say. If it does, after I read the Jules report, where it says it's a peer review, a peer review means there should be two other reports in here. The one from EOR should be here. They should have had a chance to look at the Jules report and brought back the question. That's a peer review. If this is just a simple review, well, the Jules report is good. But if it's a peer review, you have to go back and give the other professional engineer a chance to look at this report. Also, when I look at the report, it says that the pond may not sustain a 50-year rain event. So in the ECA, going to the Ministry of Environment, the ECA was submitted for a 100-year event. So do we have to go amend the ECA to do this? The reports that were brought here from the Lower Trent were all from 2016. None that were looking at the Jewel report that were there to give it what Lower Trent does, looking at it. I was part of this council that received that report when it said it couldn't pertain a 25-year event. I asked that question. I was sitting over there. I asked it twice to make sure that I had heard right, the thing. So you're telling me that the council absorbed, basically took on a pond that doesn't meet the 100-year event, because that's what the Jewel report says. And they say it doesn't require it because of where it says in the, for where it is on the pond. So it's also in violation of its ECA because it doesn't meet a 100-year storm event. So I, as a counselor, when I'm looking at these things and what's been assumed, what are the residents are accountable for?
I'm not sure there's an answer there. The simple reality is what we've heard tonight is this is our pond. So if the pond doesn't meet the standard, it's going to be up to us to make sure it does by following the peer review and or giving opportunity to EOR to answer that peer review.
True, but there's also one report, the Genevar report, hasn't been looked at either. And they also made the recommendation that it doesn't meet 25 years. And that hasn't been reviewed in here, and I don't see it. So they should have a chance to rebut also if it's a peer review. If this is just a review, totally different. They can receive it. But Preston and the CAO both said it's a peer review. But Jules says it's a review. If it's a peer review, there's two different scenarios.
I understand what you're saying, but it was my understanding that we were getting the EOR report peer reviewed,
Yes.
specific to this stormwater pond.
That's not what the Jules report says. It says a review. A peer review, they should have reached out to the engineering firm like I did and see if they were contacted by Jules. They weren't.
Well, we may want to remove that portion of it, of receipt. Well, we're just receiving the 2021 Jewel peer review. We may want to change the wording on that portion of the motion without holding up the assumption of the subdivision.
Through you, Chair. The other thing is how much is the residence now? Because we have to bring this pond to a 100-year study, not minimal 50, because the ECA says 100, not 50. How much of a cost is it now to the residents to bring it, and how quick do we bring it there?
I think we could get that information from staff. Mr. Castleman, any comment?
My comments would be, we absolutely can provide that information, firstly. Secondly, I think that what you have to note in some of our research was that the pond was designed, and the design was approved by the Lower Trent Conservation Authority, was also peer reviewed by Ainley and Associates with respect to the adequacy at that time to receive phase 1 of the Applewood subdivision. Both groups signed off on it, and on that basis, and at that time, the various regulations were met to receive a 1 in 100 year event. So while regulations and time goes by, they change, and what is said in the master plan in 2019, the regs might be somewhat different than what they were in 2015 or 2016.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. So just looking at the overhead map there we have there, just for clarification. So phase 1 and 2, along with the pond, has already been assumed by the municipality, if I read the map correctly. And we're looking at the green section highlighted in red. That's what we're assuming based on this, based on the recommendation from staff. Am I correct? So regardless of what, if there's an error with the pond or whatever, or with number 1 and number 2, we already are responsible for that. We're just looking this evening to then enact a bylaw to assume, as I said, the area highlighted in red, right? With the number 1, 3, 2, and 3, 1. Just the number 1. 3. Okay, so it's just, that's, yes, okay, I see that now. So it's just that other, yeah, just number 1. That's what we're doing tonight. We're assuming that. And if staff have looked at all of that, as far as, I know Councillor LeBlanc has had concerns about the streetlights and things like that. They have all been looked at and okayed by staff. Thank you.
Councillor LeBlanc.
Yes, and then, thank you. And in reading to you, staff, to the CEO, in reading Jules' report, when the original subdivision agreement was signed, there was going to be 33% of the land, the lots would be covered. Then it was re-amended to 45%. So that means there's 10% less percolation into the soil and more drainage and everything going towards the pond, which would also change the capacity of the pond. And it wasn't addressed at that time. So the reports, so even in Jewel, our review, I won't call it a peer review because there's no other report from any other engineers to question done. So the review done, it states that it possibly can't meet a 50-year rain event, that it'll overflow or overgo, there's very little freeboard left. So when is the time, are we going to go for amendment to the ECA, to the Ministry of Environment, to say if we can be allowed to a 50-year rain event versus a 100-year event, or are we going to bring it to a 100-year event capacity?
Go ahead.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, let's be honest, let's be frank here. We completed the master plan in 2019, and it outlined a number of different recommendations that the municipality should look at, and a number of different concerns that were raised both from a maintenance and a capital perspective. And in adopting that master plan, staff are now looking at it very closely and prioritizing projects that need to be brought forward, both from a capital and from a maintenance perspective. We've not done a good job in the past with respect to maintaining our storm ponds or storm system within this community. That's why we did the master plan, to recognize that, put a stop to it, and are now incorporating those recommendations each and every year into our capital budget.
Councillor Anderson?
So basically what we're dealing with tonight, is not the ponds, but it's the streets, the lights, and the walkways. Period.
The water, the sewer, the
And-
storm
yeah,
sewer
yeah,
pipes,
yeah.
yeah. Anything underground as
Anything
well.
underground.
Yeah,
So it shouldn't, so we need to deal with what Councillor LeBlanc has brought up tonight, but
Well, unfortunately, the motion,
not tonight we need to do.
the motion deals with both of these things. That's why we're debating, discussing both of them.
Oh, okay.
The motion, the first part of the motion is to receive the peer review report and direct staff to take into consideration the observations and recommendations of the report. The second part of the motion is to assume the subdivision. That's why we're debating both. Councillor Tadman.
Thank you. So why did we, and I'm not going to get confused with peer review or review, why did we review the pond why weren't we advised that it was already assumed? So we didn't even have to go to the cost of all that.
I'm thinking that maybe staff that evening didn't know that it had already been assumed, but Mr. Castleman?
Tremendous turnover in staff over the course of the last 5 years. And in so doing, some of the history is lost. And there's a cost associated with turnover. And unfortunately, that was one.
Councillor Rowley.
Okay, so in order to not hold up the bylaw, can we split the recommendation in two? And that we could, that council couldn't enact the bylaw regardless of whether or not we receive support or defer whatever we do with the peer review. Can we split it in two? Does it need to be one motion?
No, we can by motion split the motion in two.
Yes. So could I make that motion that we split it in two? Then it's two separate issues that we're dealing with, right?
Before I write it out, is there a seconder? I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Anderson, that council divide the motion to debate the issues under separate motions. The first being the dual review, the second being the assumption of the subdivision. Is there any discussion? Councillor Tadman.
Thank you, Mayor. I have been sitting here again and I thought about it and went over it a few times at home. And I just haven't been satisfied that my questions have been answered. So I would like to defer it. So I won't support that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Rowley?
Thank you. I guess my point in maybe moving this motion is that we do not hold up the developer based on whether or not we can accept or receive the peer review, because it would have nothing to do with whether or not the developer could move forward, right? Is there any, you know what I'm saying? If we broke it into two, if we can't support the whole recommendation, are we holding up the developer based on maybe that we would support enacting a bylaw? If you know what I'm saying, does that make sense?
I think that is in fact the case, and we might find ourselves in legal trouble, but we would also find ourselves holding up another $40 million development in the community.
That's,
I don't think we want to do that. I don't want to do that.
I guess that's where I'm going to. I would hate to hold up enacting a bylaw based on the fact that we don't know what we're going to do regarding the stormwater pond.
I think we've discovered tonight that one issue is we thought they were combined, but we've discovered that they are not.
That's, and I
pond
guess
is-
that was my confusion too when I came here this evening, but now I've had that laid out a bit more clear. So there again, they're not hand in hand. They're basically two separate issues under one cover, right?
Right. Councillor Anderson?
So so what was the deal in 2016? Did we meet the deal? Was the deal, because there was an assumption, we assumed it.
Sorry, Councillor Anderson, we're just debating whether to divide this motion right now.
All right.
We'll come back to that.
Okay. Hang on
Either
to that.
way, we'll come back
Hang
to
on
that.
to that question.
No, Councillor Tedman did not put a motion to defer on the floor. She just suggested she would want it deferred. Is there any further discussion? There was not a motion put on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Bateman.
I just want, so I can clarify it in my head, because I want to make the right decision tonight. By splitting it in two, what are we really doing? Because if we've determined that through the assumption that the pond is the municipalities.
Right.
I don't
So-
know what splitting it would possibly do,
I
because.
think splitting it in two may give us opportunity to reword the first motion and send it back to staff because there's a number of questions we're asking around the pond.
Yeah.
While also then allowing us under a separate motion to assume the subdivision.
Because then ultimately it would still be our responsibility of the pond if we assumed it back in
100%.
2016.
Yeah. Councillor Tedman.
I haven't asked for a deferral because I could support the whole street business, and if I can be confident that staff feels that he's met all his obligations, I'm not going to hold something up, and that's kind of a silly thing to say. We're going to hold up a big project like the retirement home for that much money. That's not going to hold it up. But anyways, that is my opinion. I'm sticking with it. So I'm not going to vote for a deferral. And if Mr. Castleman, because he's the one, the buck stops there. If he can be confident and tell me that everything else is met, I will vote for one part of it. But the other part really bothers me because staff should know. There shouldn't be any excuses because there's been a turnover. Staff should know what ponds we own, if that's the case. And we've wasted a hell of a lot of money on a peer review now
Language.
that we shouldn't, and well, excuse me, I could use worse. Because this kind of stuff makes me so angry. Please do not use excuses. Know what you're bringing forward. If it was assumed, and I'm still not convinced it was, I haven't seen words saying it was assumed, then it's a totally different ballgame. But if there's some responsibility,
Councillor Tedman, I'm just going to circle back to the motion that we're reading, which is
I would just want to finish what I'm saying.
which
If
is
it's
to subdivide the motion. We can have this
I can
discussion.
finish this.
You may
thank
not.
you.
You're not debating the motion on the floor,
I just want to
which is to
finish this
subdivide
part
the motion.
here. That if the developer has an obligation to the pond, then it's it's what that motion said in the first place. That's all I'm arguing about.
So is there any further discussion on the motion to subdivide the motion? All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion's defeated. So we go back to the original motion, which is to, in short strokes, receive the peer review and direct staff to undertake consideration for the observations and recommendations in the report and to enact a bylaw to assume the subdivision. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I just had some more questions, just so I can make the right decision again. The Councillor Blanc brought up the street lights. And I don't know, can I have clear, is there missing street lights? Do we know? That's what I'm hearing. So is there street lights missing that will be responsible to put in, or is that street lights they want to have there that aren't there? That, I guess the best way of putting it is, are we missing mandatory street lights?
Right. Mr. Castleman.
As I started this evening, we're going to do a bit of a tag team here. Certainly, we're here to talk about phase one on the map in front of you. It's depicted and surrounded by red, and you have the number one. That's what we're speaking about. In staff's views, all of the requirements of the subdivision agreement have been met pursuant to the subdivision agreement. What I don't want to get confused about is the area in the map under 3.1 and 3.2, where there are deficiencies associated with those two phases. And the developer in this particular case is working away at trying to fix those deficiencies. But certainly there are a number, including streetlights and curb cuts and sidewalks and a number of them that we've all noticed over the course of the last couple of years. So I don't want to confuse the two.
I think the question is about streetlights in the gray area, actually, not the one that's owned and assumed by the municipality. And so the question from Councillor Bateman is, are there missing streetlights in phase one and phase two of what I think was called Orchard Gate, or is called Orchard Gate, I think.
Okay, so to be fair, I can't speak to that. Perhaps some of the technical people that are on the call could.
And so let me just circle back and say, if there are missing streetlights, let's assume that there are missing streetlights in a subdivision that we've already assumed. Does that have anything to do with the assumption of the next phase of the subdivision, which is another developer altogether?
No, it does not.
Yeah. So it's another discussion for another day, quite frankly. Go ahead, Councillor LeBlanc.
To the CEO. All right, so we've assumed, and we'll go that the works was the lagoon. So now on Imperial Drive and on 3.2, we're missing 2 streetlights there and 3 on the other one. I know that. And now we have a lagoon system that can't meet 100 year,
Pond.
The pond cannot meet 100 year, only do a 50, which now we own, that we're going to have to maintain. Okay. The problem has been created in the past because it wasn't done right, or how staff presented it to the council at the time. I have no problem with this motion going forward, as long as staff comes back to this council and tells us what it's going to cost us, get what we've assumed, which is lacking. Because in this subdivision, we had to get 2 street lights, hydrants and other stuff done that I've been working on. So staff would come back and say, how much is going to cost us to get the lagoon where it's supposed to be? So we're not in violation of our ECA and the cost of the street lights that have to go in. I'd support this motion right now because now there's nothing we can do. It's spilt milk. It's been accepted. And I'm okay with accepting the subdivision if you're willing to bring back a report to this council.
So Councillor LeBlanc, may I suggest that we add to the first paragraph and so it would say consideration, that staff be directed, take into consideration, et cetera, and provide a report to council on the necessary work
Yes.
for the whatever the pond is, the Orchard Gate Pond. Councillor LeBlanc?
I'm okay with it.
Councillor Bateman, you're the seconder.
I was just going to say, do we need to add something since we found out that we're the owners of the pond? And I understand what Mr. Kassman was saying, and I understand what you're saying, that no excuses, but I know with turnover, if you've worked anywhere, there is things lost in the shuffle. But I'll use Deputy Mayor's line. You got to get to the bottom line. Since we own the pond, we're now responsible for producing maintenance records for the pond if the MOE asks for them. So we might want to know what the cost of that as well, because if there's been no maintenance since 2016, are we in any liability? What kind of cost is it to get that up to snuff cleaning wise?
So that would be included in a report on the works. And as the seconder, do you support adding that piece? So the line I've added is, and provide a report to council on the work required at the Orchard Gate Pond. And then it would be, and further, and it moves into the line about assuming the subdivision. I'll read the whole motion before we vote.
You had one more thing.
No, I'm running out of room.
And a timeline when the work is to be done.
Let's get the report first, and then we'll hold staff, the feet of staff to the fire on when the work will be done. Is that fair? Fair. Anything further? Councillor Anderson.
I appreciate all this information, and it's all legit and it all needs to be dealt with. But it sounds like we're putting all our apples in one basket here tonight when we've been asked to just deal with that one little area tonight. I know we got defeated on our proposal, but I'm not saying let's go backwards. That's fine, majority rule. But it does seem silly to me that we're doing it the way we're doing it. We're putting all these apples in one basket and trying to deal with all these things at the same time, when in 2016, somebody made a deal and everything was good and we met the requirements then. And now we have to, excuse the mask, have to go back and start digging and all this, bring all this up now. Why?
I'm sorry, Councillor
Anderson.
Through your chair. When they voted on it then, it didn't meet. It didn't change from 100-year to a 50-year. It was a 50-year, and they said it could only meet a 25-year. So the problems were always there. It probably wasn't presented to council right, and things weren't done. But it was passed, it was accepted. All we're doing tonight is keeping it as one motion and making it go so the developer can move forward and get his money and his holdback. But we have a problem that we have to deal with now. That was accepted. We have assumed the liability and the problems that the residents or the municipality has to deal with. I just want to know, how big of a problem do we have?
Councillor Anderson, you can continue.
That's good. I just don't want it to hold up. I want it very clear that we are going ahead and moving ahead with this, what we're supposed to be doing tonight. If there's no problem with that phase one, let's get that off. And yeah, and then so the other we just go focus on, and that's what we're going to focus on. We're not going to keep going backtracking, and so that's why we wanted to separate it.
I think a number of these concerns were raised out of the EOR Stormwater Master Plan report. And to speak again to Mr. Castleman's comments, we know we got behind, through no fault of anybody's. We thought we were doing the right thing. And then we got an engineer to come in and rightfully so, to talk to us about what we can be doing better, right, and in keeping in compliance with what was then called the MOECC, now MECP. So we know what we're supposed to be doing. And it sort of highlighted some concerns with regard to a pond that we thought maybe a developer had some responsibility for. We now understand it's our pond, we own it, and it's our responsibility. So this helps set a path forward for that specific piece of infrastructure.
So I'm in favor, and let's get on with it, and let's do what the work that we have to do to make it right with. Okay.
I think that's the path we're heading on. Councillor Bateman.
I want to move on as well, but I just want to make sure that I clarify and justify, not that you have to justify what you've said and what you've asked. All my questions were based on the information that were provided. And at that time, we didn't know, and staff didn't know who owned the pond. So that's why the questions around the pond. This isn't to hold anybody up, but we got to make the right decision. And I wasn't on council in 2016. And when I pointed out the difference in the way the reports read, the CAO has educated us that they have evolved. So perhaps it was in there, but I can only go by what I see and read. So that's why I'm asking, because we do have a responsibility to make sure we base a decision on the information we have. So now we've got information, now we can make a decision.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
I'm just going to withhold my comment then. I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tadman.
And you're going to be so happy with me, Ron, because I agree with you in this. I think that's messy to put all the extra in. Sorry, guys. It should be a separate motion, because now we know it's got nothing to do with phase one there.
That's my only concern.
but you abstained from the vote. So we've got an omnibus motion in front of us, and I'm going to read it for council's benefit so we can vote on it.
Well, you go right ahead.
It's moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Bateman. And only because we made changes and had lots of discussion is why I'm rereading this. That council receives the 2021 Jewel Peer Review Report regarding the design and effectiveness of the Orchard Gate Pond in consideration of conclusions contained within the EOR Stormwater Master Plan regarding same, and direct staff to take into consideration the observations and recommendations of the Jewel Report during future pond maintenance activities, and provide a report to council on the work required at the Orchard Gate Pond. And further, that council enact a bylaw to assume the following roads and related services for public use within Phase 1 of Applewood Meadows Subdivision, further identified in Registered Plan 39M 906 in accordance with the staff report presented at the January 11th, 2021 council session, and which has been appended hereto. Specifically, Royal Gala Drive, fronting lots 23 to 44, Crispin Street, and Cortland Way, fronting lots 1 to 22. All those in favor? You sure can. So in keeping with our procedure bylaw, a recorded vote is called by the clerk and starts with the councillor who asked for the recorded vote being Councillor Tadman.
No, too messy.
Yes.
Councilor Mark Bateman,
Yes.
Councilor Doug LeBlanc,
Yes.
Councilor Emily Rowley,
Would have preferred the other motion, but I'll vote yes for this one.
Mayor Brian Ostrander,
Yes.
Ms. Carrie.
Thank you, everyone. That takes us into bylaws, and this is the bylaw to assume the Applewood Phase 1 portion of the subdivision, moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council gives a bylaw. It's first, second, and third reading, and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to assume for public use certain roads in the Applewood Meadows Subdivision Phase 1, Municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion?
Ordered vote, please, when we're there.
Sure. There being no discussion, Madam Clerk, a recorded vote has been requested by Councillor Rowley.
Councilor Emily Rowley,
Yes.
Councilor Mary Tadman,
Yes.
Councilor Ron Anderson,
Yes.
Councilor Mark Bateman,
Yes.
Councilor Doug LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mayor Brian Ostrander,
Yes.
Ms. Carrie.
Thank you. So that takes us to question period. Ms. Lambert, do we have anyone waiting for us on Zoom to ask any questions that you're aware of? That's great. Madam Clerk, are you aware of anyone who asked to be? Thank you. Which will take us into the closed session. Before we do that, we'll take a 10-minute recess. Members of the public will note that as we recess, we will end our YouTube stream and we will not return to YouTube for the duration of this meeting. Thank you, everyone. We're recessed for 10 minutes.